Good morning and welcome to Let the Bible Speak. My name is Alex Meredith. I'm the preacher for the Marquette Church of Christ. I'm really excited today because we're going to be starting this new series talking about the great men and women of the Bible. Now, as we do this, I just want to say something outright. First of all, we're not going to be getting to all of the men and women in the Bible because there are far too many to actually cover them in a series like this. So this is just a scattering. Now, that said, we're not actually going to go with all of the, main men and women that you might expect we would cover either. So it's sort of a scattering here and there, some of them more familiar names and some of them less familiar. Now, here's the big point I wanted to get to, though. As we go through talking about the great men and women of the Bible, I think it's important to say that we are not, I'm not doing this to try to bring attention to them for the sake of idolization. Anytime we look at Scripture and we see, a main person involved in a story or narrative, in every case except for the Gospels, when it highlights the person of Christ, the point is not to get you to worship them or to, emulate every aspect of their character, because ultimately all of these people are flawed, right? But the point is to draw something out from the events within their lives, right? And in this case, what I'm really trying to draw out is we're going to be addressing some of the cultural misconceptions about what it is to be a man and woman in the society in which we live. And obviously that's a big topic today. It's a big thing that I think the church and really the Bible has a lot to say about. What does it mean and what does it look like to be a godly man or a godly woman in today's society? The first person we're going to be looking at today is a very familiar name probably to many of you. We're going to be talking about Noah. So Noah in Genesis 6 verse 9 is described right away as a righteous man. So I figure that's a pretty good place to start, right? If we're talking about what it means to be a godly man in a godless society. So we're going to start reading in Genesis chapter 6, verse 5, and we're actually going to take this through the beginning of chapter 7. So I'm going to start reading here in Genesis 6, verse 5. Feel free to read along with me. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. And Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. And God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark, and cover it inside and out with pitch. This is how you are to make it. The length of the ark, 300 cubits, its breadth 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. Make a roof for the ark, and finish it to a cubit above, and set the door of the ark in its side. Make it with lower, second, and third decks, for behold, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth, to destroy all flesh, in which is the breath of life under heaven. Everything that is on the earth shall die, but I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall come into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. And of every living thing of all flesh you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female. Of the birds according to their kinds, of the animals according to their kinds, and of every creeping thing of the ground according to its kind. 2 of every sort shall come into you to keep them alive. Also take with you every sort of food that is eaten, and store it up. It shall serve as food for you and for them. Noah did this. He did all that God commanded him. Then the Lord said to Noah, Go into the ark, you and all your household, for I have seen that you were righteous before me in this generation. Take with you 7 pairs of all clean animals, the male and his mate, and a pair of the animals that are not clean, the male and his mate. And 7 pairs of the birds of the heavens also, male and female, to keep their offspring alive on the face of all the earth. For in 7 days I will send rain on the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and every living thing that I have made I will blot out from the face of the ground. And Noah did all that the Lord had commanded him. Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters came upon the earth, and Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives went with him into the ark to escape the waters of the flood. You may have heard the name Galileo before. There was an event hundreds of years back known as the Galileo Affair. Now, what you need to know about this beforehand is that for millennia, basically, everybody through human history up to this point believed that the sun revolved around the earth. That's just the way that it was. That's how people understood it, right? That was known as a geocentric model, right? Geo referring to the earth. The earth is at the center, right? So it was believed and understood that that the sun revolved around the earth. That's what was believed. Because when you're standing on the ground, that is what it appears is happening, right? So that's the geocentric model. Now, back in 1543, Nicholas Copernicus, or Nicolaus as his name was pronounced actually, he was Polish. He's a mathematician, and it's in 1543 he published De Revolutionibus Orbium Celestium, the movement of the skies, essentially. And he proposed what became known as the heliocentric model, because he did his calculations, and what he believed was actually going on is he believed that the earth actually revolved around the sun. And so he made his case in this book. The book didn't get a lot of attention, but at least not at the time. So Copernicus's work was there, but it wasn't really prominent in any significant way, culturally speaking. But in 1610, Galileo Galilei, this Italian astronomer, sort of working off of the work of Copernicus, he first published this work, Sidereus Nuncius, Starry Messenger, as it was called. It got some attention, but then the big work was in 1632. He published this work called The Dialogue Concerning the Two Chief World Systems, in which he really considered this idea of the heliocentric model. Now, in response to that second work that really garnered a lot of attention, this was after the invention of the printing press, and so this work was distributed far and wide in this case. And in the wake of that, there are a lot of people that took issue with it. In fact, in 1633, just a year later, the church held Galileo on trial for the things that he had written and published in this book. And what they ended up determining is they declared him a heretic. They said that all of his books needed to be banned and burned and everything else. And he ended up being sentenced to a lifetime of house arrest to be served out in Florence, Italy. And that's exactly what happened. Now, it wasn't until 200 years later, really, that people realized, oh yeah, he was right. It's just that at the time, nobody had really considered the possibility that that was true, right? So when you think about the resistance that Galileo faced at first, why was it that people were so resistant to this idea of the heliocentric model? Was it because his astronomy was bad? Was it because his math was wrong? Was it because the numbers didn't make sense? Not really. He was resisted because it was unprecedented. Because virtually all of history disagreed with him. But here's something we learn in the wake of that. Just because you are alone does not mean that you are wrong. When we think about the flood, right, I think that the flood was something that was a totally unprecedented idea, not only because of the scale of it, not only because it purportedly wiped out, this massive creation, not only because of the scale of it, but I want you to consider something. When we look back at Genesis chapter 1, look at the order here. Genesis chapter 1, starting in verse 6, God said, "Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, let it separate the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse, and it was so. God called the expanse heaven, and there was evening and there was morning the second day. That's in the initial creation account. The waters above the heavens and the waters under the heavens. Many of you probably know that that word heavens is sometimes used as a general reference to talk about the unreachable. It's the sky, essentially. So you have the waters under the earth, or under the heavens, I should say. That would be, Lake Superior's water under the heavens, right? It'd be groundwater and the water in the lakes and the seabeds and all of that. It's just water as we know it on the ground. And then the water above the heavens, what does that sound like? Well, it sounds to me a lot like clouds, right? That condensed moisture in the air. Now, you have that described in chapter 1. Over in chapter 2, verse 5, listen to this description. When no bush of the field was yet in the land, and no small plant of the field had yet sprung up, for the Lord God had not caused it to rain on the land, and there was no man to work the ground, a mist was going up from the land and was watering the whole face of the ground. You have something like ground fog appearing there over the surface. But it describes there, it says it had not yet rained. Now combine that with what we see in chapter 7, verse 11, when the flood waters finally come. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month, on that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened. It sounds like that may have been the first time it actually rained, in the sense that we think about rain, right? So, we don't know a ton about the religious world prior to the days of Noah. I mean, yes, we have all of the description about Adam and Eve, and we have the story about Cain and Abel, and then we get a lot of kind of quick movement after that leading up to Noah. We don't know a ton about what they believed religiously speaking, except that they were evidently just so wicked, and it was so bad that God regretted that he had created mankind. That's what we see in the beginning of chapter 6, right? It was just extreme ungodliness. So take those two things together, how ungodly people were and how lacking in morality people were, and the fact that maybe it had not even rained before. And now, what is Noah told? Think about how bizarre that must have been. God is going to bring rain upon the earth, and it's going to be so drastic that all of creation virtually is going to be destroyed, right? Can you imagine Noah talking to people in the town, telling them about this? Which, by the way, 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 5, you know what it calls Noah? It calls him a herald of righteousness. That word herald can be, you could substitute the word preacher of righteousness. It seems that maybe Noah was going around trying to warn people, and evidently nobody believed him. So, yeah, that was a bizarre idea. But he obeyed anyway. Not only would it have been bizarre to the people around Noah, that probably would have been a bizarre idea to Noah himself. And yet, what does he do? He's told to build the ark, and he obeys. He does it. In Hebrews chapter 11, verse 7, this is what we see in a description about Noah in the New Testament. By faith, Noah, being warned by God concerning events as yet unseen, in reverent fear constructed an ark for the saving of his household. By this he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. Just because you are alone does not mean that you are wrong. I talked at the very beginning about correcting cultural misconceptions about what it means to be a godly man or a godly woman in the world. And, as we talk about this idea of being alone, being the only one, I can't help but think about the fact that, being a Christian man, like if you are actually doing the things that you're supposed to do, being a good, genuine Christian man in the world today can be a very isolating thing. There's some research done on this topic. It's found that back in 2007, about 74% of men in the United States were self-proclaimed Christians. 74% back in 2007. And just a few years ago, that poll was redone, and that number goes from 74% down to 59% of self-professing Christians. 36% of Christians in general, men and women both, report religious discrimination at work in some capacity. Again, that's self-reported, so I'm not sure exactly what that looks like or what they perceive as that discrimination, but 36% report that. 22% of men, this is a really scary one to me, 22% of men have at least two people in their lives that they feel close to or feel that they can depend on. That is a very small percentage of men who have people around them that they feel they can trust and rely on. 22%. And then you combine that with the fact that socially speaking, all different types, on just a moral level, different types of activity that was once commonplace, considered, sinful and not good, is now just socially accepted. As if it is the norm, right? So one example of this, 68% of Christians, self-professing Christians, say now that sex outside of marriage is acceptable, right? So if you find yourself in that 32% that opposes that, you immediately, even just within the church, find yourself in a very isolating position. So once you exit that realm of and context of the church, think about how isolating it is to hold these various moral positions on certain ideas or behaviors, right? So all of that to say that being a genuine Christian man, a husband, a father, somebody who's trying to stand up for what is good and right, is something that is increasingly difficult and rare. Maybe you felt that pressure in your life, that's a really hard thing to do. Just think about this. You have this man, grows up in the church, and by all accounts you would say, yes, this is a good, godly man, and he's on a construction crew, and it's one of these crews that gets shipped out to different places. He's a welder, and so he gets shipped out with this crew to different parts of the country, sometimes for months at a time, working on a project. Well, this guy gets sent out on his first job with 20 other guys that he does not know. He doesn't know anything about them, and it's kind of a mishmash of different guys from different backgrounds, different religious affiliations, right? Well, 20 different guys. And over the course of 5 months, would it be surprising at all if that man were to come back and his habits were a little bit different and, his behavior was a little bit different than it was before? No, it wouldn't be surprising at all, right? I mean, he spent the last 5 months with these guys almost exclusively in a town where he didn't know anybody else. So it is really easy to sacrifice, and by the way, maybe that's a good thing and maybe it's a bad thing. It just depends on the company, right? But it is very easy to sacrifice your values and lose your identity on the altar of acceptance, right? Imagine the fallout if Noah, so afraid of what other people would think, just said, nah, I don't think so. That's a little too weird. It's a little too out there. What if he did that? I don't know that anybody would be around today, right? Well, what could happen if you refuse to be the odd one out? If you, sacrificing yourself on the altar of acceptance, decide, you know what, I'm not going to go that direction. There might be negative consequences to that sometimes. William Lloyd Garrison was a Christian back in the 1800s, and he believed that his Christian faith compelled him to be an enemy of the institution of slavery in the United States South at the time. And so in 1831, he starts publishing this paper called The Liberator. It was published out of Boston, Massachusetts, and it was considered an abolitionist paper. He made the case against slavery from a Christian perspective. Now, it was kind of funny because by and large in the Northeast, many people actually agreed with him. Not everybody, but many people tended to agree with him, and so he didn't get a lot of feedback from people around him, but he was briefly imprisoned in the state of Maryland for some of the things that he wrote. In North Carolina, he was indicted for publishing what was referred to as incendiary material. The state of Georgia placed a $5,000 bounty on his head at one point. And it wasn't until 32 years later that the Emancipation Proclamation was issued by Abraham Lincoln. And all of a sudden, this idea that once was considered totally radical and crazy, later on was just commonplace. Just because you were the only one that stands up for something, the only one that believes something, doesn't mean you're wrong. Maybe you find yourself in a situation where a lot of people around you are not in agreement with you, right? Now, one possibility is that maybe you are the lunatic. It's always possible if I am the 1% and 99% around me do not agree with me, it is quite possible that I am wrong. Sometimes I think we need to listen to that. Sometimes God puts people around us to keep our crazy ideas in check to a degree. So that's a possibility. But if you study and you pray about it and you are absolutely convinced, hey, this is what I believe to be right, and you are still the odd one out, you need to stand up for what's right. The measure of a man and the measure of a woman, for that matter, is not about how popular you are or how well-liked you are. It's righteousness at the end of the day, right? Sometimes it is our moral decisions that are isolating. Sometimes it's our faith. It's our faith in the promises of God. It's our faith in this belief that one day, just as we talked about in the weeks before, one day Jesus is going to return, the living and the dead will appear before the judgment seat of Christ, and one day those bathed in the blood of Christ will be brought into his eternal presence, right? And I think there are a lot of people today that would look at that and say, hey, man, that's crazy. How can you believe something like that? It's so bizarre. Well, I understand. I understand people's reluctance. I also understand the reluctance of people to advocate for those beliefs because they're afraid of what other people might think. But I'll just point out something to you. Everything is unprecedented until it's real, right? Over in Matthew 24, take a look at this. Matthew 24, starting in verse 36. Concerning that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. For as were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day when Noah entered the ark. And they were unaware until the flood came and swept them all away. So will be the coming of the Son of Man. It sounds crazy until it's real, right? And it sounds, the words of Jesus sounds real to me. 2 Peter chapter 3, starting in verse 3, know this, first of all, that scoffers will come in the last days with scoffing, following their own sinful desires. They will say, where is the promise of his coming? For ever since the fathers fell asleep, all things are continuing as they were from the beginning of creation. For they deliberately overlook this fact, that the heavens existed long ago, and the earth was formed out of water, and through water by the word of God, and that by means of these, the world that then existed was deluged with water and perished. But by the same word, the heavens and earth that now exist are stored up for fire, being kept until the day of judgment and destruction of the ungodly. Everything is unprecedented until it's real, right? So I would just challenge you, those who are watching, those who are listening to this, be willing to be the odd one out. For some of us, that's really easy because we're always the strange one in the room, right? Some of us, maybe it's easier than others. But be willing to be the odd one out. Trust in God and obey God, even if you are the only one doing it. One last passage I want to go to here and read with you before we wrap up. This is over in Galatians chapter 1. This is something that Paul says to the church in North Asia. But I think it's very much related to the exact things that we're talking about here. So he's not talking about Noah in this case, but listen to what he says about the things that he's going around preaching. Galatians chapter 1, starting in verse 10. For am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? Or am I trying to please man? If I were still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ. For I would have you know, brothers, that the gospel that was preached by me is not man's gospel. For I did not receive it from any man, nor was I taught it, but I received it through a revelation of Jesus Christ. Paul was perfectly willing to be the odd one out because he knew and understood that his responsibility in the world was not to appease other people. It was not to hold a position that was popular or made him well liked. It was to please and honor and obey God. So that's what we need to do today. Before we wrap up, I want to tell you about some of the resources we have to offer to all of our viewers. First of all, we have a 7-part workbook program. This is our Bible correspondence course. It's published by the World Bible School. You can sign up for this and participate in this by going to the World Bible School website, worldbibleschool.org. You can sign up on there. You can also let us know by mail that you would like to participate, and we'll send you those resources directly. If you do not have a Bible, we want you to have one. We ship them out totally free of charge. We don't expect anybody to pay for shipping or anything like that. Just give us your address and we'll send that along to you. You can reach us by mail to Marquette Church of Christ. That's P.O. Box 372. It is in Marquette, zip code 49855. And a lot of this information is available on our website, letthebiblespeak.net. There's also a way to contact us through there. If you get the chance or you miss an episode maybe on a Sunday morning here, you can look up all of these episodes. The audio format is published as a podcast on those apps you see on the right side of your screen, Spotify, Audible, and a few others. Just search Let the Bible Speak UP, and you should get our channel to pop up. You can find all our episodes there. It's also on our website once again. If you get the chance, we would love to have you worship with us, both the Marquette and the Escanaba congregation. We meet for worship at 11 o'clock. The Marquette Church, if you know where the senior high school is in Marquette, we're just across the road from that. Our parking lot's kind of behind the building there, down off of Birch. So feel free to park down there and join us for worship one of these Sundays. We look forward to seeing you sometime. I want to thank you so much for joining me on the program this morning as we start this new series. We're going to take this forward, and we're going to be talking about somebody new next week. I believe, if I remember correctly, that's going to be Samson. I think there are a lot of really valuable stories and lessons to be had there in that narrative. And also, it's just a really entertaining biblical narrative as well. It's really fascinating, a little bit humorous. So I think that'll be a great time. Once again, thank you so much for joining me this morning. May God bless you, and I hope you have a wonderful, blessed week.